Me today. My name is Ashley Hernandez, and I am the VP of Products for our Enterprise Solution Group. So I'm excited to share today our introduction of a new product that came out that we just announced and have started to have available for release. We announced it at the end of March, and we actually now have it available to you guys, as well as today we're going to go over kind of what the values and what the offering will entail both in the near term and a little bit of what we'll have going forward. So our new product is called Endpoint Inspector, and it is a product for remote computer. Sorry, there's somebody not on mute, so I can hear some feedback. But let's see if I can. And it is going to be a remote computer collection product that allows you to gather information from endpoints across the organizations that we work with. So let's talk about what why we're introducing this and what it will be able to accomplish. So when we look at the corporations that we work with, we are seeing trends. Sorry, if someone can make sure they're putting themselves on mute, that would be great. When we're looking at corporations, what we've noticed in the last year is a more quick transition to having folks working both in the office and from their home. So there's always been a portion of workers who worked from home, but what we're really seeing now is the majority or a good portion of workers will continue to work from home, and we still have corporations needing to collect images or files from those employees, no matter where they're located. So we want to be able to do that without interrupting their work, and we want to be able to do that in a way that will be able to be then analyzed for some of the common use cases that we look at. So when we talk about needing to do collections for corporations, whether they're a service provider or in one of the industries that needs to look at files from employees, we're looking at scenarios like folks who need to collect for e-discovery, if that's in Australia, for instance, or the UK, or even North America, or companies that operate both in those regions and globally. It could also be for looking for specific types of employee misconduct. So these type of corporate investigations could be around fraud or around accusations for managers, and we need to look at how we can investigate those claims and then allow the corporation to make a determination of what actually happened in a situation. And the last scenario that we focus on around kind of these corporate investigations is around IP theft. And so we want to give them the ability to look into these different types of problems and be able to resolve them, collect the information they need, and determine what happened in that matter. We need to be able to do that, though, without disrupting the employee's work, and we need to be able to do that in a way that is safe and secure, as well as it allows them to audit who is accessing which systems and what they're collecting from those. So our Endpoint Inspector product, that is the new product that we released, is focused on collecting from remote computers, and we're calling it remote just because it's not something that's going to be plugged, the examiner isn't going to directly plug something into it. They're going to run software on these remote devices, and we're focusing on computers first. But as the name Endpoint indicates, we are going to be able to eventually add additional functionality that will handle both computer and mobile. Those will be two separate pieces to the overall solution, but this initial offering is really focused on the remote computers. So what does that solution look like? We want to, this is kind of going over what I just said, sorry, but this is part of the material that our vendor provided to you as far as the sales deck. But no matter where those endpoints are located, we are going to provide this year the ability to collect from those endpoints. Initially, that is again going to be computer. And then as we move into the year, it will also be for mobile. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. It was part of the material that Arvinder sent to you. This is the sales deck overview that you can use to present to to potential prospects. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how the system actually works. I will take pauses for questions as we get through talking about some of these pieces. You can ask me if there's any clarification you need about the pieces of the product or just any items that are unclear. So the way that our remote computer collection will work is there is 3 parts to our system. The first, we're going to start on the right-hand side of the screen, is actually having an agent that can be installed on a Mac or Windows computer. And that can be installed either proactively, so they could have it placed on the computer in advance, or they could deploy it to the computer just when they need to do the investigation. That agent will run on the computer without any interface that the user really sees or the employee really sees, but what they will be able to see is that process is running. So there's no interface that they interact with, but it is not completely hidden from the user. They would be able to see that there's something running on their system if they evaluated the processes that are on that particular system. So we would deploy those to the different agents. We'd deploy the agents to the different computers, and then they're going to communicate with a central server. Our offering is designed to be hosted in the cloud. So that server could be hosted on Azure or AWS. They could have it on-prem, or they could have it in a cloud system like that. And they will control that server, and they will be able to see which agents are connecting to their server, and then they will control permissions to who can see what is on that particular server. So as an example, if I were to have an agent running on Tim's machine and Arvinder's machine, I would still need to be, as a user, Ashley, choosing to I would have to be given permission within the server to access specific machines. So I could have permission maybe to see Tim's, but if Arvinder was our CEO, maybe I wouldn't have permission to see his. Or, vice versa. Maybe I only have permission to see systems in a specific region because that's the region that I'm located in, and we don't want to pull data to other areas. So that can be set up in the server with the administrator's information, and that is something that they can then use to manage who has access to what systems. So once that is set up in the server, you have agents that are registered. You'll be able to see if they're online or offline, and then you'll have users set up in there that are going to be given permissions to which machines they're actually able to look at. You're actually ready to do the investigation. And so at this point, you would be able to run the client software, which would run on your local system. So again, if I'm the examiner, I would be installing the endpoint inspector, the actually inspector piece of the client on my computer here. And what that'll allow me to do is connect to the server, and then I will be able to see the machines that I have available that are online, that I have permissions to, and I can preview those machines. So essentially what that will allow me to do is look across the network for these machines that are online, and I will be able to view the file system of those systems. And then I can choose, if I want to look at particular files, I can choose to bring just those across. So I'm not doing a full collection at this point. I'm just looking at what files are on the file system, and I can choose to review specific files, or I could choose to select multiple files and then pull them across into a collection, and those will be stored on my local machine. So I'm going to take a quick pause at this point and ask if there's any questions so far about how the solution will work. either have done really well or you guys are already a little bit familiar with how Endpoint Inspector works. I usually have a few questions, but we can also move on to some of the other pieces of what's available for you guys as far as training. Let's see, actually, let me make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. You would have to unmute yourself to be able to ask a question.
Yeah, actually, I'll ask one just to get you in the mood.
Okay.
When we start the collection, is the traffic encrypted during its transmission?
That's a great question. So we do actually use encryption through all communications between different endpoints. So the communication between the agent and the server is encrypted. We use TLS 1.3 encryption, which is the most recent and most secure method for doing communication, as well as once communication is established between the client and the agent, that traffic is also encrypted end to end. So one of the things that we really focus on with our solution is making sure that it is secure and is using those latest encryption methods. So we want to make sure that they're authenticated and that, no matter where they are in the system, that traffic's not able to be observed in any way by other processes. All right. So some of the key benefits that we focus on are included here. Let me make sure you're seeing the next slide. So the 4 benefits that we really focus on with this solution that are included in your solution one sheet that's available for you to provide to customers are the fact that we really focus on this being a secure method for gathering files across the network. You are looking at machines while they're live, but you're able to collect the files that you need and want to focus on for those particular cases. Also, we wanted to make sure that you could look at what's on the system. There are use cases where they just want to identify if a particular file or files are on the system before they choose if they want to do a collection. And so this is a way to quickly and non-invasively be able to check. Maybe you're concerned about malware being on a system and you're looking for a specific file in a specific location to indicate that, you would be able to do that with this solution. Next is we have really designed it to be able to work with folks. As I mentioned, one of the main pain points that we see today is people working both at the corporate headquarters, but also working on their home network or traveling. Hopefully we're able to return to that type of movement here in the near future, and being able to make sure we can gather from devices regardless of where they're located, as long as we can route from the agent to the server, then we will be able to support collecting from those agents, because we do actually have the agent communicate to the server where what its local IP address is and any of those changes have happened, so that we can make sure to build that connection. We can actually make the connection go through directly from our examiner to the agent once communication has been established, or broker it through the server if needed for a proxy to make sure that communication can be maintained. And then last, once you bring the collection over, so you've selected the files that you need, you are able to do full analysis like you would do within Inspector once those files are collected. So I did want to mention that we are using Inspector as the full analysis capabilities once we have collected the files. And this solution offers them the ability both to do the remote collection and the full analysis in one package. So let's talk about what that looks like. So we mentioned that there's a server that's involved, and for when they purchase this product, they will be able to have one server set up that can manage. Right now, we're kind of targeting around 1,000 agents that would be actively managed within the server. We'll be expanding that as we go through the year, but just to kind of like fit with where we are as far as how easy it is to manage those numbers of agents and how the interface works with it. we're really focused on, folks having active agents around 1,000 of them. You can have up to 3 examiners working concurrently in the system. So if there was me and Tom and Drew who were all connected into the system, we could all do either remote collections or full analysis using that license from the server. There's no hardware keys involved in this situation. Everything's set up to be kind of virtual. All 3 of us could be working in parallel and could be working with multiple machines at the same time as well. So I could be previewing or working with collecting from a couple machines. Maybe Tom would be collecting from 5 machines, and Drew isn't collecting from any machines, but he's actually doing analysis of some casework. We would be able to work within the system all at the same time. And even if we had 10 examiners that worked, but maybe they didn't all work at the same time, they could all have the examiner software installed on their computer, and they would just take the license from the server when they're using it and then return it once they were done with their work. So again, you're getting the ability to have 3 examiners working at the same time. You can have more set up in the system, and then they can work with remote collections of concurrently at the same time, 10 across those 3 users. Any questions on kind of what's included in the package of what's provided to the customers? All right. So then that is the end of what is in the general sales deck. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is how we can actually vet if a customer is a good prospect for this type of product. So our vendor provided you in the materials that he sent in advance. One of the documents is called the qualifying questions. Did you guys receive this, or can you guys see this on my screen right now? I brought it up on the screen. Hopefully that's sharing. Yes, great, thanks. So when we're looking at who we think are going to be good candidates for this type of solution, we're really focused on corporations that have between 1,000 and 20,000 employees. Once we get over that size, we will be able to provide some additional support for them as we go later in the year, as the solution has more robust scalability components to it. But in this initial offering, we're looking at if they have between 1,000 and 20,000 employees, this solution should work for what they're hoping to achieve. We are looking at specific industries that we know have more needs around these type of investigations. So financial companies, insurance, life sciences, technology, pharmacy. Those are the type of organizations that often are looking for the ability to complete these types of collections. And if there is a larger company, we would want to say maybe just limit it to the subsidiary for the first pass. In general, these are organizations that are going to want to have this in place for ongoing use, so that they can purchase it once and then use it with their different employee devices. We see less use by service providers, although I will say that we have some service providers who've inquired about it since the announcement. So we're not going to say that they're not ideal candidates, but they might have slightly different needs than you see with the corporate customers. Again, some of the types of investigations that are going to most fit what our solution is geared towards are things like HR misconduct, IP theft. Those are things that we have strong advantages with inside of our solution. So not only would you collect those files, but then you're able to do those full investigations within Inspector. So you can look at what USB devices were accessed, and then what other activity based on event logs or other information on the system was accessed during that time, looking for particular files that might have sensitive information, whether that's source code, manufacturing information, or even just customer lists or other kind of secret sauce that might be of concern if it was lost within the organization. We also believe that e-discovery and asset management are another scenario where we see use for this. Even when we've surveyed customers, what we've seen is even for data recovery purposes, people trying to look and recover files that they can't seem to find, because we are able to get some of those, they use this type of solution. For e-discovery, we know that we're going to be adding additional workflows that will make the e-discovery process more repeatable, as well as tracked for e-discovery as we grow the product. So we put that in the neutral category because we know there's areas that we want to continue to add and improve to the product. It could be used especially for just small matters at this point, but if they were doing large scale e-discovery collection, you know, hundreds and hundreds of machines involved in the e-discovery, we would want to maybe push that opportunity back a little bit farther until we have more support for kind of automating that process later in the development cycle. And then for incident response, right now, we're not as focused on some of the live artifacts that you might be able to get remotely. So memory or running processes, things that are in RAM, the volatile information. That is something that we're looking at the future, but those are often really critical in incident response cases. So if their only use case is incident response, this might not be a great fit for them in the beginning. We would need to be looking at that once we had some more of those volatile artifacts that they would really want for incident response. All right. Again, when we're looking at some of these questions to just determine which is candidates that are best, if we are talking to customers and they're doing, you know, between 5 or 10 cases per month, those are ideal for the type of solution that we have today, especially because it's going to be them probably dealing with, you know, maybe 10 computers per investigation or 15 computers per investigation. It's really designed for that direct ability to look at the files, determine what you want, and bring it back. So when we talk about the next two stats as far as qualifying questions, we're trying to understand how much automation they think they're going to need versus they're really kind of having the examiner drive the investigation and looking at each individual system. Once we get into more than 25 cases a month or over 100 machines involved in each manner, we do believe that they're going to want more automation and more ability to, say, preset all of the collection criteria in advance and then have that work against 100 different machines. Those are items that are on our roadmap and we will be providing, but they're not provided in this first version. And so we're going to see more of that as we get farther in the development of the product. Some of these items are more just kind of where we fit with what the technology has. So you can see that what kind of devices are we looking at within the collection? Mac, Windows, that makes sense because those are ones that we have agents for. Mobile is something that we're going to be looking at in the future. So that is still a positive piece that we have. We can provide remote collection capabilities or collection capabilities for mobile devices with UFED or with our detachable license solution now until other solutions are available later in the year. And then we do have our cloud acquisition tool. And so we've included that as something else that we can handle, but it's not necessarily integrated in with part of Endpoint Inspector. That's just more part of the Cellebrite set of solutions that we provide. Things that we don't have right now are a Linux agent. So that's probably the number one request we have pending based on feedback we've gotten from early folks that are looking at the solution or attending webinars where we've talked about the solution, is are we looking at adding capabilities to acquire from Linux devices? So that is on the roadmap, but that is not something that we have in the near term. All right, we also have the ability to deal with exporting data to platforms like Relativity or Xterra. We do have load file formats for those. And some pieces that we also want to just highlight is the ability that we really can control and audit who's conducting remote collections. And of course, one of the values that our Cellebrite solutions offer is if they would like to work with a vendor who handles both computer and mobile together. Any questions on any of those guidelines or kind of qualifying questions that we might use for potential prospects? All right. Also provided to you is, let me make sure I can bring this up. the collateral that you'll be able to give to prospects. So this is a one sheet that talks about some of the values that we really highlight with our solution. Can you guys see this brought up onto your screens? Okay. So this focuses on our ability to connect to multiple machines at the same time to conduct independent investigations. You can, again, have multiple examiners working on collecting from multiple different machines at the same time and be able to manage users' permissions, access, and audit what they're actually doing. So this includes some of the kind of diagrams that we commonly use when we're talking about the solution. So as you saw in the presentation deck, we are looking at the different pieces here of the client, the server, and then the agents. And then we talk about what some of the main features they're able to do. So they can triage files across the network, collect and analyze from both Mac and Windows. We can see what files were on the system, what's been installed, system logs to see what's actually happened. And then those points that we also had in the sales deck are just reiterated in this particular piece of collateral. So that is available for you guys to use and leave with prospects as some information about it for their reference. All right. And then let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about competition and what other products you might hear of when customers are looking at a remote computer collection solution. So there are three main competing products that we will hear as far as when we talk to customers. There is Encase, their enterprise products, whether that's e-discovery or security or their enterprise like investigator product. There is FTK Enterprise, and then there is Axiom Cyber. So when we're looking at those competitors, I'm going to kind of group two of them in one category, which is Encase and FTK. And then the third is Magnet's Axiom Cyber. The two, Encase and FTK, are older solutions that have been around for remote computer collections for quite a while. And those solutions are available for them to be able to do some of these remote computer collections. When we look at how we compete against them, those are both technologies that do have more automation built into them. So some of them handle a little bit larger scale right now, but they weren't designed when employees were kind of doing this mass work from home. And so there's still challenges within both of those tools to being able to really connect to those agents. Both companies have tried to recently address some of those challenges, and there's been some success with that, but there's still a lot of frustration with users from both of those camps where they have been looking for alternatives to doing remote computer collection. Neither of those organizations really have a mobile collection expertise. And so one of the values that we're really bringing is being able to do both that remote computer collection, which they do have some technology around there, but also being able to kind of talking to what we're going to be doing in the future, be able to also be able to do remote mobile collection. So again, one of the values that we want to provide is kind of one experience with being able to manage both of those eventually in the same interface. So you wouldn't have to have separate products with totally separate training and separate abilities to do those independently. We also feel that when we're looking at how the product is managed and set up, we've made it really easy to deploy this in the cloud, as well as easy to manage these devices in the web. So historically, especially when we're talking about products like Encase, those products have been very difficult to use. In the instance of FTK, that product has been very difficult to set up. And so in this instance, we're really trying to make it much easier for them to get set up and get going with the product. So I will also say though, as part of our offering, whenever we sell this product, We do want to, especially in the beginning, focus on making sure we also sell the installation and training for them to originally get set up. We want to make this process as seamless as possible. And so when we look at purchasing the product or having customers purchase the product, they should purchase both the software itself as well as that training and installation, so that we know that these customers are going to be the most successful that they can be. So when we're talking about NCASE and FTK, those are older solutions. People are looking for alternatives. Those would be items where we can say, yes, we can offer you something to be able to accomplish those. Again, using those qualifying questions to make sure we're going to be in our kind of sweet spot for that. And then also leaning into what we're going to be offering later. We are very confident that we're going to have a roadmap that will compete, as well as once they bring that data across, so not just the remote collection itself, our inspector product, what was formerly called Blacklight, and it's going to be the same analysis product for endpoint inspector as it is for inspector, has the ability to view more of the updated artifacts from those systems. So sometimes right now we'll hear that people maybe use NCASE or maybe use FTK to collect the files, but they have to use a newer tool to be able to analyze the files. What we're really offering is to be able to do both. A tool that can collect the remote files, but also it's up to date with all of the artifact parsing that they expect to need to be able to actually work the investigation for their analysis within the same set of tools. Any questions on NCASE or FTK competition before we look at Magnet? You guys are very quiet, so we're gonna end up early if we don't have any questions, but that's fine. I will move to Magnet Axiom Cyber. So Magnet Axiom Cyber is a newer initiative. So this was offered in the last year, and it still has limited functionality compared to NCASE or FTK. It is designed to really have just a one-to-one connection, whereas we can kind of have multiple examiners working on multiple machines. This is really kind of meant for one person to collect from one machine at a time. And it doesn't really have a central way to manage those connections. So there's not a web interface that lets you control who can access which machines. And there's not really that auditing capability that we know corporations are required to keep in order to kind of manage what's happening on the system. So they also are focused right now on just Mac and Windows. So we know that that's kind of what they're looking at. They do have, and this is actually true of all three other vendors, some of the older security technology. So using communication protocols like the older TLS 1.2, where we use 1.3. But they're definitely not currently scaling. We know that they do have some challenges depending on how the agent is installed and what network permissions there are. They don't have the flexibility we do about the direct connection or the proxied connection. So we've heard some challenges there from folks who are looking at that technology on getting that set up and working being a struggle. So again, we want to make sure that ours is something that is easy to set up, easy to get the information off of those systems, and easy to manage as far as who's able to access which system. So those are some of the main points when we look at comparing our endpoint inspector product to the Magnet Axiom Cyber product. Pricing wise, the Axiom Cyber product is less expensive than the NCASE and FTK products. You're looking anywhere, it's going to really depend on where you're looking at the price, but you're looking at around $10,000 US for that type of solution, whereas the other products might be, 20 to 40 to even more for the NCASE and FTK type products. All right, so those are some of the highlights on the actual competition part. Tom or Tim, have you any questions that you've started to receive about it that we could cover, just to make sure if there's ones that I've not already tried to cover in our overview, to just kind of spark maybe some other conversations that they may have?
Sure. Some of them are slightly more technical, along the lines of things like, will the end user know that there's activity on my machine? That type of question.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do that is kind of tied to what I had mentioned earlier is get a lot of questions about what is the bandwidth use? Is it going to interfere with their work? Are they going to notice that they're being collected from? And we really have tried to actually monitor and manage how much bandwidth we're using. We know, especially in other locations, or depending on the bandwidth of their home network, that we don't want to use too much of that system resources. We want to be successful in being able to do the collection, but also not interfere with the employee's work. So we do try and keep that amount manageable. We won't say that they will never notice that something's happening. For instance, if they were kind of having their computer sit idle, they might still see that the device is being accessed, but they're not going to see any prompt on the screen or any information about what is being collected from their particular system. So that would be typical of any of the solutions. There are ways for you to be able to tell that something is running on your system, but you're not necessarily going to be able to see what is actually happening. And in general, we also have some questions about, do we have best practices about how to notify employees that their system is under management? And the typical response is that we actually focus on making sure that that's kind of put in place at the time people are hired, or that if you're deploying a new system, to let people know that this is something that is able to be done on their systems. So you're very transparent that this is running on systems that are corporate owned devices. So most of our computers are provided by our employer for work purposes. And so kind of explaining to them and working with the legal team to make sure you're within the rules within your jurisdiction is a good way to make sure you can get those identified in advance, and then you can work with the notification employees so that they know that that's possible at any time for those sort of corporate investigations.
I think the other most popular question I've had at the moment is along the lines of, what type of auditing or logging of the data we're collecting are we doing?
Yeah, so we are logging which examiners are using the system. So when they log in and they connect to the server, we can see who's logged in when they connected. We can also see which systems they tried to connect to, if they successfully connected to it, and we're working with a particular system. We don't log down to which file that they viewed on, but it would show them that you've worked with a specific system and you've done a collection from that system. And those are all managed in, again, that central server where they can see the additional information. All right, I am going to look and see. I want to find one more set of screens for you to show you what some of the screens actually look like. So give me 1 minute here while I find that. All right, switch this out. All right, are you guys able to see the screenshot of what this looks like? All right, so when they first log into the web server, this is how they would be able to connect to be able to see which systems they are able to manage on the server. So if I was an administrator, I'd be setting up users or examiners that are going to work in the system, and I might also be managing which agents we have. So as you can see within the web here, this would just be their online server for Endpoint Inspector. You're going to have your different examiners, and they can have, in this example, we actually have everybody as both administrators and analysts, but often you would have one administrator and then you would have your analyst set below. So for every analyst, you're going to have a profile like their username and password, and you're going to have information like which agents they're assigned to. You can also remove examiners' permissions from here by deleting them directly in the web. So they can have as many people as they want set up as users, but they're really going to, in this first edition, only be able to work with 3 examiners currently working in the system at one time. That will scale up as we get further into the systems. Then we have the agents, and you can see here that the agents are going to show which systems are online. We're going to see their host name. We're also going to see their IP address. And again, if the system goes offline or they move Wi-Fi hotspots, we will update the IP. The agent is set to detect if they have changed IP addresses or changed location, and it will notify the server of their new IP address. We can see the last time that system was online and what type of operating system it has, as well as what version of the agent is running on that particular system. Last, we do have the ability to write notes about that system, so you can kind of just have a friendly identifier in case you don't remember what each system is just based on its host name. And each agent that runs on a system does have a unique identifier in the system. So even once that agent's set up, even if things like the IP address change, we're still able to uniquely identify that agent within our system. And that's also part of our security model, is to make sure that every agent has its own unique way of communicating with the server. So even if for some, unexpected reason one agent was compromised, there's no ability to make that compromise any other of the systems. We talked about those audit logs, and that was one of the questions that Tom just had. And here we can see things like users logging in. We would also see if there were any issues here. So we do want to make sure if we had an issue where, say, in the middle of the connection, we were trying to work with a system and it went offline and the connection then failed, we'd be able to see that type of information listed here. So you're going to see who was doing the action, what systems they were working with, the time, as well as whether it's just a regular information level or an error level message. That's part of the system. The last kind of menu on the web is the settings, and that would control things like which ports you need to have available and open to be able to facilitate communications between the agents and the server. Any questions on the web portion of the product? All right, then let's look at what Inspector looks like. So this would be how you would connect to a remote system. If you're familiar with what was Blacklight already, this is actually the updated interface for Inspector with our release that's going to be coming up as well in the next week or so. So this is going to be the updated kind of look and feel. As you can see here, the actual layout of things has not changed, but up in the title bar, we now look more similar to Physical Analyzer in that we have kind of this same coloring and flat icons, and we just updated some of it. So you would log in and create a new case, and then you would choose which system you wanted to connect to as far as the server. So you would say, okay, this is the IP address or the host name of the server I want to connect to. I would put in my username and password, and then that would give me permission to connect to systems that are attached to that particular server, so agents attached to there. So in my instance here, I've chosen to have 2 different systems previewed. I can see that I have a Windows system at the top with only 1 volume. I also have another volume here that'll show me information that's attached to that. And I can choose to then preview and look at these files. So if I look on the right-hand side here, I'm able to actually look at and browse the file and folder system, and I can open up these to be able to see the metadata that'll be in the bottom left here from that system, and I can choose to actually bring across the content. By default, when I highlight an area, it's not going to necessarily bring across the whole file, because if you accidentally clicked on like a 10 gig file, we wouldn't want to have to wait for that to automatically come across. What we'll do is allow you to choose which systems you want to bring across, or which file content you want to bring across. But you will be able to see the whole kind of file and directory listing once you preview a particular system, including permissions and whether it's deleted and the general metadata we normally see for files. You're also going to have the ability to do file filtering and also looking at thumbnails for pictures. So we can see here in the browser view is where we're just looking at the kind of how you would in the Explorer. But if we were to switch tabs over to file filters, we could look for things like the name contains a specific word, or we could look for files within certain time ranges, whether they were deleted, locked, hidden, file paths. Maybe you want to see just everything that's in the users directory. And then you could choose to highlight all of these or select specific thumbnails if we were looking at images, and then choose what you would want to collect. So once you've selected files like you would here with the checkboxes, you do have this option down at the bottom to choose to create the collection. So currently it is kind of that directly having an examiner look at a specific machine and preview what they're looking at and then choose which files they want to collect. So it's a very interactive process. One of the next things that we're going to have in the upcoming release is the ability to kind of set those criteria in advance. So just like we see in the file filter here, maybe we're looking for files with a particular name. We could set up a criteria that says, go ahead and just collect all the files that contain the name Jenkins, and you could have that set even from the web to allow that to do the collection, and you wouldn't have to have the examiner actually interact with the agent and the preview. They would able to just have that as a preset types of items that they're looking at for collection. All right, so I think that is all that I had to cover today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and just let me know if there are any other